Welcome to Dem Bahamians, a media initiative of the Bahamian American Cultural Society. The mission of the society is to expose the culture of the Bahamas and its peoples to the world through music, food, literature, visual arts. Today we're going to be talking about the music of the Bahamas, and in particular a symposium, a first for the Bahamas. My guest today is Marlon, Daniel, and Christine Gangelhoff. Welcome, Christine and Marlon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having
Dem Bahamians.
Thank you.
And I'm happy that you all are going to be with me for the next hour to talk about a wonderful experience that happened in the Bahamas earlier this year, a symposium that was the first for the Bahamas. And I'm going to start off with Marlon. I heard that there was an orchestra there, and that is a first for the Bahamas.
Really?
To have an orchestra there, I think was a wonderful thing for the school kids to see, and just for other people to have the experience who haven't, heard or seen an orchestra. So can you tell me about your experience down there in the Bahamas?
Well, we had a fantastic experience there in the Bahamas. So we were invited by the the Music Society of the Bahamas, National Music Society, and they were able to bring us there. And Ensemble du Monde is my orchestra, and we are based here in New York, even though our members come from all over the world. Thus the name Ensemble du Monde. And so we were there as it started off as a small residency and ended up as a festival, which they of course call a Festival of Afro-Carribean Music, of which we performed a lot of music by composers of African descent and Afro-Caribbean descent. So we were really very happy to do this, and we had come because basically we had done a similar festival in Guadeloupe in the French Caribbean, and from the Saint George International Festival, and then were sought out by everyone in the Bahamas. They thought it was such a fantastic idea that they wanted to have something very similar in the Bahamas, and so by just putting it out there, as they say, you build it and they will come. It got to the ears and the of Christine Gangelhoff, who was writing a book on music of the Caribbean, and basically she contacted me. The internet is a wonderful thing, and contacted me about music that was going on in another part of the Caribbean, which was Guadeloupe, and basically about the music there, and particularly the music of Saint George, which I am a big champion of the music of Saint George, and who is of course a Caribbean composer, a French Caribbean composer, who was born in Guadeloupe, in Basse-Terre, Guadeloupe, and so she wanted to get some input from a source of things that were happening there in other parts of the Caribbean, and then we kind of talked over the few months, and basically said, but the best way, why don't you guys experience this music, and why don't you have something that sort of inter-island communication, and that's, we got together with Patrick Thompson, who is the head of the Nassau Music Society, and we've made it happen. And so I brought the whole Ensemble du Monde, which is my orchestra here, to the Bahamas.
Okay, and how long did it take for that to put that all together, Christine?
I think it took close to 2 years to make it happen. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was a long process because as Marlon said, I contacted him about this research I was working on, and at the time we sort of just started brainstorming about how to make this happen, to bring his orchestra to the Bahamas. And I thought it would be a great idea because the NASA Music Society, I'm sure you're familiar with them, they put on about 5 concerts a year. And so I approached a number of organizations about trying to make this happen. And one of the first I contacted was the U.S. Embassy, and because they had sponsored some educational events in the past, and I know they have a strong push for the arts. And they were interested, and so I brought that to the NASA Music Society, saying we already have some support, and see if they could make it happen. And they had several years before, I'm not sure the year, they had the Moscow Chamber Orchestra, that was, I think it was about 10 years ago. And they were hesitant to do it again because that was such a really big ordeal. But as Marlon said, his orchestra has a lot of diverse backgrounds in it, and that was and also the fact that they play the music of St. George of Caribbean descent, I thought would be more relevant and could reach out to more of the community.
Right.
And so Nassau Music Society really liked that idea, and so they decided to go with it.
Okay.
So they had to find sponsors and go through a lot, and so basically it took about 2 years to make it happen.
Okay.
And then once it got down to it, everything happened really quickly.
Right.
So the symposium that we did with the composers, that was part of that overall festival.
So now this symposium, it carried, how many days was that?
The symposium was just one day.
Just one day. Okay. And when you say one day, just one evening, or was it
the whole day?
The whole day.
It was a full day. It was 3 sessions, and the first session was a panel of Bahamian composers. So there was Cleophas Adderley, Audrey Dean Wright, Christian Distillion, and Quincy Parker.
Okay.
4 distinguished Bahamian composers, and then the second session featured Cleophas Adderley was a Bahamian composer in there as well, and then some composers from the Caribbean descent. Dominique Legendre from Trinidad. She's in UK now, but originally from Trinidad.
Martinique, yeah.
And then a composer from Puerto Rico, Carlos Carrillo. And there are a number of other performers that also appeared on the third session. That was a roundtable discussion. So there's 3 different panels over the course of the day.
Was this a paid event, or was it open to the public?
It was open to the public. It was held at the College of the Bahamas in the Harry Seymour Library Auditorium.
Okay, and how was the response?
It was amazing.
Amazing response,
yeah.
Really.
Okay.
The first session was packed. There was no space for anyone.
Wow.
And we got responses there were some Defense Force band members there. They were asking when's the next one going to take place.
Yeah.
A lot of the COB students were there, and members of the community, the music community, the arts community. It was really well received.
Yeah. I mean, the music community of Bahamas is large.
It is.
I mean, I'm surprised that it is as large as, every church there are like 3 or 4 choirs. Let's talk about how did you, thought that would go in the Bahamas to undertake that project?
Well, it was a very big project, but since I've been there, I just finished my 6th year at the college.
Okay.
And since I've been there, I've been researching the composers of the Bahamas and of the region, the Caribbean, and so all of this has been in the works for some time. And so my first year there, actually, I discovered a Haitian composer that wrote. He's a flutist too. His name is Julio Racine. And he was the sort of the impetus behind my research, because it hadn't occurred to me before that, as many people thinking of classical music as coming from this region, because you associate it more with the popular styles.
Right. Yeah.
So before I went there, I never even considered that to be a possibility. It didn't occur to me. And when I heard this piece of his, sort of a light bulb went off, and I thought there must be more of this going on.
Right. Yes.
And so I started looking around, and I knew of the Bahamian composers, some of them. So I started there because I had access to a lot of the composers or their descendants, and started that, and then gradually started looking at other composers on other islands, and found that there's a lot of material, but there's really no central location where people can access it. So that's why I started working on a bibliography, compiling all of that information.
So all of that is housed where? At the College of the Bahamas?
Well, right now we've published the first volume of the bibliography, and it's on the International Journal of Bahamian Studies. So it's published, it's an online edition.
Oh, it's online. Okay.
And then we're working on the second volume, which should be published probably early next fall, early in the fall, I believe.
Well, the thing that surprised me when I was interviewing Audrey Dean Wright, Professor Wright, she mentioned that opera was sung in the Bahamas way back, many, many years ago. When we look at the history of the Bahamas, Bahamian music, It started out with the anthems that was brought to Bahamas by the Loyalists, and rake and scrape music that was brought by the Africans during slave time. So, you know, that's in the 1800s.
Right.
You know,
There's some
and
long
of
traditions.
course, and this is a revolution that has taken place for an orchestra and a symposium to happen in the Bahamas. It's quite a wonderful, you know, thing to have happened there, and I thank you for you know, being a part of it, and for you for bringing that, you know, to the Bahamian people, which is really a wonderful appreciation. I'm sure that was shown.
Yeah, a lot of the people had the same reaction, that they didn't know this type of music came from that region. Even people in the audience, we said there was a girl at the symposium that became known as the blue shirt girl.
Yes.
And she said, she made this comment at the end, and she said she just was thanking everybody, all the panelists, and saying, I didn't know we had this.
Yeah.
And she just kept thanking, like, thank you, I didn't know, and everybody was so moved by that.
That was an inspirational moment. But, you know, it's always, you know, because a lot of students and a lot of people, they always think that art music and classical music, it's not their music. Because they haven't been educated about it, and they don't, and it's a tradition that's not sort of passed down as it is with some other cultures. And I found that that's a very big impetus of my orchestra, because we are very diverse. You know, we have, besides representing over 15 countries, we also have a plethora of different nationalities and things like that. And with Saint George, he was like actually at the time an influenced Mozart, and a lot of people don't know that, because people of color have been a part of music, in every part of music. And I would think at least since the classical period, and probably before that. And so to bring it to the attention that, you know, art music and things like, you know, that are really art and not just pop music of the day, you know, was not only respected but practiced by people of color. And you know, my first experience was of course with Saint George, you know, because I really, you know, I'd been playing piano and studying all my life, and the first thing that a lot of people would say, and especially in my youth, is, why are you playing that music? That's white folks' music. And it's everybody's music. And when I discovered Saint George, it's sort of, you know, hit an aha moment for me. And then I discovered like a whole other world, that there are actually composers that are, you know, of African descent in every period, and a lot of them. And you know, now I'm being called probably the foremost interpreter of music of composers of African descent. I'm like, wow, you know, that's a big title. I hope I can live up to it, but I just want to actually put everything in perspective, and, you know, and be more inclusive to all types of music. Me personally, and of course the orchestra, we perform good music, and we try to bring good music to our audience. We're not really trying to saying, well, this is just black music or this is just white music, but we try to bring good music. And over the course of the years, I've discovered a lot of music that's good music that deserves to be performed. Right.
And reading the symposium bio, I got the impression that the music that you're talking about, Caribbean Afro music, it's not being exposed to the degree of other composers. Do you experience that, or why is that?
I experience that a lot, because I think that, you know, as performers, especially performers of color, we need to seek out these works and we need to perform them. Just plain and simple, you know, that's what I do. Besides all, you know, the works I do of Mozart and Mahler and all of these other composers and Tchaikovsky, you know, I also throw in music of William Grant Still or Saint George, or you know, and so it's been, you know, and that's, you know, on the internet. I just did a concert in last year, February, in Russia, and I represented the United States, and they were very interested in American music. And the first thing they go to is George Gershwin, and this is a person who was influenced by composers of African descent, and of course with this Porgy and Bess and other pieces of music that he did. And I proposed to them a program that included another composer of the time, William Grant Still, and of course he wrote the Afro-American Symphony, and they were so excited, and to come to find out that it had actually never been performed in Russia.
Wow.
So I did the Russian premiere of that, and it showed them, you know, back-to-back Gershwin with William Grant Still, with a bit of Copland and things like that, of how music at around that time was being performed, and also to show people that there are other composers out there, not just the ones that are being played over and over again.
Right, right. Yeah, no, you know, when I heard, I think at the university transition team was here, they gave me the CD. How long has this been out?
That we released that in October 2010.
2010, 2 years now. And when I heard that for the first time, I said, wow, that's big, that's this music in the Bahamas?
Yeah.
I mean, this is really a beautiful CD. How is it going?
Oh, it's great. The C-Force, that's our CD.
Yeah, C-Force.
So it's myself, Christian Justilian, and Christy Lee, and we're called C-Force because we're all Chris's.
Okay.
And so that's our first CD, and we started that CD as part of a grant from the college. They funded the CD in part, and it was basically to represent our 3 areas of research. And so some of the tracks are Christy Lee, her background is in opera, and so she arranged some opera duets for us. And it's flute, euphonium, and piano. And then my research areas, I mentioned, I've been researching Caribbean composers, and so there's I think 4 composers on there from the Caribbean. And then Christian Justilian is a composer and a performer, and he wrote a piece, an original for us for the CD.
Which piece is that he wrote?
His is Tilla, the last.
Tilla, the last one. Oh, he wrote that.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So yeah, so you could play that track. That's a great.
We'll definitely play that, include that in the show.
And the producer we worked with, Terry Manning, he was at Compass Point Studios at the time. He's producing our second CD as well.
Okay.
And we just finished recording it, and we're going to be editing over the summer. And that one is going to be featuring all Caribbean composers. So we have several Bahamian composers. So again, Christian wrote a suite for us. So that's an original piece for the C-Force. And then there's a piece we made an arrangement of Clement Bethel song on there, and a piece by Franz Hepburn.
France, right? Okay.
And then we have some other Caribbean composers as well. So we have, it should be a great CD. So we're really looking forward to that.
Yeah, great. Now the thing that confuses me about this, the cover, it doesn't, it has no representation of being produced in the Bahamas or by Bahamian and other, co-producers. Why was that? What's the name of this?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The cover art is by John Cox, who's a Bahamian artist. And so this was his concept, and it's basically like what he did was he listened to the tracks. We gave him all the tracks before they were on the CD. So he had the edited tracks, and he basically walked around with his camera, and he took pictures of things that he sort of abstractly heard, like he visualized hearing it. And so on the cover, there's some bold colors, like the flowers and things, and he said to him that was represented the euphonium, like the bold sound of the euphonium.
Okay.
And the piano is represented by like the little pebbles and the small fine things that take many, many different things to make a composite of the sound. And the flute is represented by the water. And so he said it has a very flowing sound and a continuous sound. And so he came up with that design.
So it's a piece of art all into itself.
It is. It really is. We were really. It is.
That's very interesting. And I'm just just a question that I have is basically, so when you perform these works, do you actually have a video type of thing going on also with the works interacting? Because that would be a fantastic idea.
Yeah, that would be. We are adding some visuals. We have a couple things we do. One is what we call an infocytal, Chris came up with that term, and we taught, because none of these composers are known really by the majority of people, and so we just have a simple thing where we show a picture of the composer and basically where they come from, if it's the Bahamas, Guadeloupe, Haiti, and their birth year, just to give people an idea of who this is that wrote this piece. So that's one thing we're doing. The next thing we're doing is Chris wrote this suite, as I mentioned. It's called Bahama Island Suite, and it's based. Right now, he has 5 movements, and they're based on 5 islands that he either lived or they've influenced his life. And Marion Bethel is writing poems to go with each of the movements, and then we want to have photographs from each of the islands to show. So it would be that's basically where we're heading with that.
Well, let me ask you, the symposium with all the orchestras and the singers. Will there be a CD of that?
Well, we're just kind of going by. This is a huge undertaking and a huge experiment. What I hope is that someone in the Bahamas will take this further, because the Bahamas is such a strategic place for people to come there, and it worked out really well, especially with having like a sponsor like Atlantis Resort to come in and provide housing and things like that, and some funding. So that was a really good one. When the Bahamas seem to be a place where people, when they have the idea, they seem to really mobilize quite quickly. Once you get past whatever you have to get past, but when it's time to do the action, they actually, the Bahamian people seem to be really hard workers and really going for things that they think are important. And that would be a very good thing, because of course New York is only like 3 hours away. And then people from all over the world can come to the Bahamas, and you have so many great facilities for people to congregate there, like the Atlantis, and also having the connection to the U.S. And so I think this is the start of something big that can actually really happen there in the Caribbean. As like a mecca for music and art.
Right. Yeah, I can definitely see that being an annual thing. I hope it can be, mushroom into that.
Yeah.
Because it can be another way of, bringing people.
Yeah.
If they didn't even tap into that, it was that could make it definitely
tourism.
Yes. Yeah. It definitely.
There's a market out there.
And the exposure that Caribbean artists are getting, it's wonderful. They might not get it elsewhere, or Bahamas can capitalize on that.
It could definitely be a big thing. I mean, I know that other islands have experimented with it. Probably the most successul is in the French Caribbean in St. Bart's. With the St. Bart's Festival. But what I find is that a lot of the islands, even though there are a lot of people of color, or the dominant people are the people of color there, they're not actually participating in the festival. And that's something that, of course, politically really interests me. And even with my orchestra, we have a lot of diversity, and I think that that's a big point. You have to show that on the island that you're doing, the diversity of the island. You have to cooperate with the people. You have to do things that are, coming back to the island, showing the island off in a positive way.
Right. And I think also the exposure. That was the first time, and if you got a very good response, terrific. Next time, it's going to be even larger, because I think the word is going to get out that it was so well done, and the music was really beautifully done, and a top class. You couldn't have, done it better, from what I heard, and lots of good words are being, said about the symposium, and the kind of the persons who came, that they were really pleased that they made it,
Yeah, there were a lot of great events. So we have footage of a lot of the various days. So the entire festival was basically almost 5 days.
Yeah, 5 days. Okay. So what all did you have during those 5 days?
Definitely a week. Yeah.
Well, the structure happened. We sort of worked on the structure for some time, but it started, the first night was a local musicians evening to sort of kick off the festival, and that was the Sea-Force had the first half of the program, and then followed by the Bahamas National Youth Choir.
Okay.
And so we shared a full program, and Marlon was at that, and some of the festival orchestra musicians were there as well. And then the next day, that was a Wednesday night, then the next day was Thursday, all day Thursday was the Symposium, so that took up that day. That was the 3-panel of composers and musicians. And then Thursday was the children's concert, and that was the one funded by the U.S. Embassy.
Okay.
And that was a real highlight for a lot of the orchestra.
That was a fantastic highlight. We did a multimedia event with Chrissy Love.
Okay.
And we did a whole...
She's a radio personality.
Yes,
right?
she was fantastic, actually.
She was
did
perfect.
a great job. And we basically did a whole event called Before There Was Mozart, which we did a interactive media event about Saint George, which of course is one of my specialties, on Saint George and how he influenced Mozart, and at the time of Mozart what was going on. So you had someone of color at that time that kind of brought the kids in, and we did music of Mozart, and then we took it a little bit further to show the kids that there actually are composers of African descent even to this day. And we finished it off with like explaining instruments and showing how different instruments. So a lot of the people who played the instruments got fans. Who knows? Somebody might actually. The biggest turnout was the bassoon for some strange reason, but he made a good impression. After all, I thought that he had practiced solo, influencing all these potential Bahamian bassoonists to come out of the woodworks. So that was really fun, and the kids were tremendous. They were quiet throughout, and they asked such intelligent questions. And they were very inquisitive, and that made my day. That was one of the highlights, I say, of my career at this point.
Well, I think probably they're going to have more musicians coming out of the schools who haven't been exposed to all of those instruments, and to see the kind of orchestra that they can be a part of.
Of course.
They were mesmerized.
Yeah, in Bahamas they only know about 3 or 4, but here's an orchestra of how many people were in the orchestra?
Ensemble de Monde is a chamber orchestra. In general, we expand and contract. For this particular occasion, we were a small chamber orchestra of 24 people.
24 then. And that's
yes.
Those kids, I'm sure, have not seen an orchestra of 24, people with instruments, so they're just being exposed to all those different instruments.
It made an impact.
And the sounds that they make, must have been really, really exciting to them.
And the other component of that was I worked with one of our students at COB, Krishan Johnson, and we came up with a lesson plan that we distributed to the teachers.
Yes.
And so the teachers gave this lesson plan to their students, and so they were prepared for the concert before they got there. So they already knew about this composer, and so when they saw the orchestra playing and they saw his picture and they had the visuals, they were just so thrilled because they already had some information on the composer.
Yes.
And so
do you have that on a tape or something of the children attending that event?
Yeah, we have some footage we had 2 of the COB film and media studies students documented everything.
Yeah, that was great.
So they did a great job. So they interviewed some of the children. They have footage of the children entering, and then the concert with the children interacting with the orchestra. So you'll be able to play some excerpts from that.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Was it broadcast in Bahamas? Or?
It hasn't been yet. They're actually working on editing basically a documentary of the whole festival.
Okay.
So it'll have the opening night that I mentioned, some of the Symposium, the children's concert, and then they also played a concert at Atlantis on Friday night.
Okay.
And then Saturday night was the concert that was dedicated to the 40th anniversary of Bahamian independence.
Right.
And on that concert was the premiere of Cleophas Adderley's Sanctus that was written for orchestra. Well, it was transcribed for orchestra and percussion. So from the choral arrangement. So
how long was that piece?
That piece is about 5 or 6 minutes, I would say.
Okay. Maybe we can incorporate it in the show.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
That was a really great piece. And then the second premiere that evening was, you want to talk about Dominique's piece?
Oh yes. Well, we were trying to also, expand it, have an international feel. also, and Dominique Lejeune, she came from London to actually have, she had 2 of her pieces performed.
Okay.
So it was this whole thing with the symposium and the music and everyone, it was like her coming here, well, not coming there to the Bahamas, to actually, you know, interact with the composers that were there, and it was, you know, it was like Dominique meets Cleophas, you know what I mean? And and it was on so many levels, you know.
She's an opera singer, or?
She's a composer.
Oh, she's also a composer.
She's one of the few. First of all, there's, you know, you can count the Bahamian women composers on your one finger.
Right.
And so she's probably the most well-known Bahamian, well, not Bahamian, but Caribbean female composer in the world.
Okay.
And to meet Cleophas, and Cleophas to meet her was like a really great meeting, you know.
Did they play one of her pieces? Or?
Yes, we played 2 of her pieces.
You did play 2
so
of them.
she was the composer, our guest composer for Ensemble du Monde, and so we brought her with us as well as some other artists. You know, just we brought world-class artists with us, and I think that was really something that, you know, not only could the kids and the audience see performers, but they could see world-class performers.
Right. Now, these performers, are they stationed here, and where are they stationed?
Well, from Ensemble du Monde, of course, it means Ensemble of the World. And, you know, we brought Kogabra Kameda from Germany, and, well, he's from Japan and Germany. And he basically came to the Bahamas, and he owns a Harold Stradivarius. So he was playing on a Stradivarius for, you know, for all of the audiences to appreciate, and you know, first prize winner of the Heinrich Schering International Violin Competition. But in the orchestra, we had people coming from, you know, Canada. We had, you know, members of ours who are coming from, of course, Germany. Members of ours coming from different parts of the world, all, you know, congregating there, you know, straight to the Bahamas, you know, and that was really, you know, and I think that's really great. It was like a We Are the World, but in the Bahamas.
Right, yeah. And how do you think they can go about doing that? You know, being more appreciative of that, because that seemed to be a problem, that, you know, we don't appreciate what we have. You know, we tend to latch on to something else that is what's happening now, and forget our own, what we have, you know.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion around that, and I know a lot of the musicians are hoping for more opportunities to perform in the hotels and even that type of thing, because a lot of tourists would love to hear more of the local music and traditions, but they don't know how to find it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not clear.
That was also the great thing about the symposium.
Yeah.
It brought these composers front and center.
Yeah.
And that was the genius of that, you know.
Yes.
And, you know, and when we started this, and Christine was, you know, it started off as just music, and we were like, no, it has to have I was going to say a universal, but it had to have an educational component that brought these composers together, and brought the composers that are of the Bahamas and also other Caribbean, you know, the other places in the Caribbean together, and brought it front and center. And i.e. the blue shirt girl, you know, she was just, you know, very moved by that, and it moved everybody there to see that there was a place that we were doing this.
And I think also an appreciation for the composers that we have there, and the recognition, and the kind of support that one should give to those composers to do more than what they can do with the little that they have, you know.
Yeah.
Because Bahamian music is very rich, and there are some areas of our music that, you know, it's being pushed to the side. Like you said, in the hotels. When we go to Bahamas, we want to hear Bahamian music.
Yeah.
You know, or Caribbean music. And you go to the hotels, it's not there.
Yeah.
You know?
It's very rare.
You know, which is, you know.
And to inspire the composers of the future. I mean,
exactly.
The kids that were there,
two there
from the college, you know, you know, they weren't thinking about composition, and as you said, the music of the Bahamas is rich, And I mean, you know, you have composers like, of course, Bela Bartok, and all of his music is based on Hungarian folk music. You don't know if you're going to have a Bela Bartok who says, oh my God, this was really great, I should start doing this, I should start making music and charting, and even like in Czech Republic, Janacek, you know, cataloging the music of my home.
Right.
And so this is, you know, that was for me a real big thing with the symposium, is that you never know who you're touching, and that could be someone who could be the most significant composer of the 21st century. Or
it's so true.
I think too also that the appreciation that the visiting artists brought there and showed for our artists, for our composers, it shed light that those who have kind of taken them for granted saw that. I hope they saw that and now have a greater appreciation for those artists and support them. So I think that that is really needed. There are a lot of artists that are not, you know, working at their craft, that are just sitting idle, and we need to appreciate them.
That was a big thing.
Expose them.
That was a really big point you just made. When all these composers and educators that came to the symposium, it also showed that the people who are struggling or trying to do this or thinking about doing this in the Bahamas, what they need to do to get on this level, to be performed and to get their word out, because they saw these composers from other places and they were like, wow, this is what it takes to get there. And so it educated them in a whole new way. It's, you know, it's like, well, get a plan. This is how you do it, and how, you know, and what it's like, and on this level what you have to achieve. And if you can see the light, you can get to the light. And so it really opened the doors for those college students who are thinking. I know that one of them in particular, he's doing an instrument, I think a woodwind instrument there, and he was like, well, you know, and I've been thinking about composition, and so it showed him, you know, where all the composers talking about how they did it, and what it's needed to do, and what kind of education you need to have it, and what kind of training and things like that, and that brought them into a whole perspective, like, wow, I need to do this, so that they start to formulate a plan in their minds.
Yeah, and they're thinking. It opened up a different a spectrum of thought, and another avenue that, gee, you know, I can make a living doing this. You know, so that I hope that, you know, it begin a different chapter for the musicians and for the folk artists that's in the Bahamas. The Reconstrate music. You know, people love that. You know,
definitely.
A few years ago, we had a band from Bahamas, a Reconstrate group from Long Island, at one of our Bahamas Culture Day, and folks loved it. They love it. And last year we had a band from, I think, Jamaica, which was good, but you know, we don't get to hear our music here in America, so we want to, you know, bring our Bahamian artists over, but that was the sponsor's choice, so we had no other choice but to go with it, you know.
Of course.
But you know, we want to expose them, and that's not only our Bahamian artists. We want to expose our artists of color, because you know, I'm around here. I've noticed a lot of artists, producers, bring in a lot of you know, their friends, and I say, wow, you know, we need that kind of exposure.
Definitely.
You know, someone, you know, and there is an artist, a producer that's doing it, but it's not. It's not. They're not coming in every Friday like the other producers.
This is a big issue, and it's an issue of education also, and
I think it's appreciation and respect.
But once you get past the appreciation of respect, of course that's done, but also you have to be educated on a level to actually perform this music. You have to you have to have the same education as everyone else, but you know, and I, you know, hating to say this of my grandmother's thing, that you have to, when you're a person of color, you have to be 10 times better to get a job, because people don't see it as often.
And, exactly.
And that's really, you know, one of my big points, of course, you know, when we have a lot of people of color in my orchestra, but they're not in my orchestra because they're of color. They're in my orchestra because they're the best I can find.
Right.
And I think that these days, I call it the Obama age of classical musicians. We have a lot of musicians of African descent and of color that are virtuoso musicians that you never knew about or never heard about. There is a huge surge these days. I mean, the principal clarinet of the Metropolitan Opera is a person of color.
Right.
You know, Anthony McGill and his brother, a flutist, I think in California, he's the principal flutist of, I think it's San Diego Symphony. And they are, you know, they on the Griot 100 as, you know, people to watch. You know, you have Anastelle Meduse in France. She is the only concertmaster of color in the world, and it's of the Orchestre National Ile-de-France. And we have a lot of people like this that are gradually making their way, and it inspires kids to pursue classical music. Well, I didn't have this type of people, but you know, I was inspired when I was very little by, you know, I saw a concert with a woman playing Beethoven Fourth Piano Concerto, and at that moment I knew that that's what I wanted to do with my life. But later on, you know, I found that, you know, being a role model for other kids of color was even more of an impact. I had this little girl after I gave a concert, and you know, we give a lot of tickets away to inner city schools and things like that with Ensemble du Monde, and she afterwards she said to me, she says, you know, I never knew that there could be a black conductor. I've only seen white conductors, and seeing you, it made me feel like I could do anything. And she wasn't a musician, but you know, who knows? I could be talking to the future president. You know, if I lived that long, this girl, and it inspires people not only to be musicians, but also it inspires people to be all that they can be or have a dream. And so it's more than just playing music sometimes. It's more of, you know, exposure and inspiring people.
Well, just a few months ago, I was at Carnegie Hall, and they had various high school students come to perform, and there was a female conductor, black female conductor conducting the choir, and I said, wow, you know, and she looked pretty young, like in 20s or 30s, and I said, wow, we need to have more like that, you know. So it was very nice to have seen that. And of course, it was a very good band, you know. She was competing with all the others, and she had to have been good to be performing there at Carnegie. So it was really good to see that. And I think I love the exposure. I mean, I believe that we need to be exposed to all these things, and we want to see more of it on television.
Of course.
You know, so that, and more of it in the Bahamas too. You know, Sunday afternoon, you know, where they're playing in Bahamas, they need to be playing, you know, some of this music. I mean, ZNet should have been recording that.
We did. We tried to get audio recordings. What we ended up doing was having Hugo Zarate teaches in the media in the college, and he had two of his students that we hired to document the entire festival. And so they did record all the concerts and the symposium, and so we did manage that much, but we didn't get a full, you know.
Well, that's good. Well, you know, all of our programs here at Manhattan Neighborhood Network are seen here on Time Warner, Channel 33, Fios 34, Time Warner 34, Fios 33, RCN 82, and also on the web. So my show is seen throughout the world, 2 o'clock every Monday. So that's, you know, the kind of exposure that, you know, in the Bahamas you can get on the internet.
Absolutely.
And definitely, you know, if you're here in New York City again and you'd like for me to, you know, to bring an orchestra, I definitely would love to have them here.
Well, we're planning. We have a series here, and we're artists in residence, ensemble in residence at the New York Society for Ethical Culture.
Oh, ethical culture.
Yeah, they just started a new thing with us, and so it's been really. So we do a lot of things that are going on here, and you know, we'd be happy to come back.
Okay, sure.
And so we're hoping that we actually even able to bring, you know, the the National Youth Course of the Bahamas here.
Right,
We're working
yeah.
on a project, and we're hoping that they're able to, find the support they need to actually come here, and because we're working on a new work, and we're doing world premiere, and with such a fine course that after I heard them perform, and I think that they're I think that they're one of the best groups there.
Right,
These
yes,
kids
yeah.
really work very, very hard, and and I think that they should be exposed, because
True.
that would be a great thing to have them for our next season.
Definitely. Yeah. So how did you first start, saw that music was going to be your profession, or something that you like to follow?
Well, I first started music at a young age, and my father's a musician, and in Chicago, where I was born. And my father was actually, a classic story of your mom and father not being together. And but every Saturday he used to take me and my brother, to my grandmother's place, and where he would appropriately practice for his exams. And I'm like, wow, that's that's some quality time there. So he would practice for there, and this started because my father's one of those guys who actually, he would do a few credits a year. So by the time he finished his degree, I had finished mine. So everybody's required in music school to do a piano requirement. Everybody, you cannot avoid it. And if you don't play piano. So he was practicing for his, and of course it's not his first instrument, so he was doing his little ditties and things like that, and little small pieces. And probably a defect of my personality, I was really quite tired of this after a few weeks. And and so after I was watching him, and so I've been watching him for weeks, and so I went to the piano and I played his piece, and I said, I fixed it. Now can we go have pizza? And I always like to think that's the day I grew two heads. And it's just kind of, and after that, it's kind of like my father wanted to show me things and things like that. But, I just really wanted to just spend time with my father. But after that, I went to some concerts that he was performing in, as a percussionist. And I saw that one concert with the woman playing piano, and I actually saw how the piano would just affected my life. I don't know, my core. And I thought that one day after I saw her, and I remember, I think it was probably the Hungarian pianist Lily Krauss that they were performing with, and she played Beethoven's Fourth Piano Concerto with the orchestra. My father was in it, and I just was mesmerized, and I just knew at that moment that that's what I wanted to do in my life. And from then on, I actually pursued that.
Okay. So music has been your career throughout.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's been
another second job.
It's my only job.
Okay.
And one thing that you can say when you're doing something that is what you love doing is that when things are going badly and everything never goes always smoothly in your life, but you can look back or look at it and say, but I'm really happy. I'm doing what I love. Some kids want to grow up to be a fireman, police officer, a doctor, a lawyer, and I always wanted to be a musician. And I wanted to travel the world and do all these things, and I actually am. So whenever there's a bad day, I can fall back on that I'm actually doing what I love.
So when you first started, you never thought that you were able to do all of the things you're doing now with it?
Well, actually, that was always my fantasy, and now my fantasy is my reality. So I always, even from a young age, I was playing piano, and I was a child prodigy in Chicago, and I got to the attention of Mayor Harry Washington, who, he was my sponsor, and Vernon Jarrett, who's also probably in your field, and they were people who saw me early, and so I've always been doing things to this degree. I started off with piano, which I'm still playing piano, but now conducting has actually brought me to a whole new level of reaching people, and so that's been really exciting for me.
So what do you have on the board? What are you doing in the future? Anything that you're going to be doing other than what you're doing in agriculture?
Well, the Ensemble du Monde is a really big part of my life. Because it's such a great ensemble, but also I'm the principal guest conductor for the Sofia Sinfonietta in Sofia, Bulgaria.
in Bulgaria. Okay.
And so I'm there a lot. I have a 2-year contract there, and I'm doing several concerts. Actually, in the next month, I'll be leaving here to go to Canada to perform with the Peninsula Symphony, doing Sansone Piano Concerto, which is I'm playing piano. And then going from there to Sofia, Bulgaria, where I'll be conducting one of the final concerts of the season as principal guest conductor.
Okay, that's using their musicians, or were you taking musicians with you?
Yes, I'm a conductor for their symphony.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And I travel a bit, doing a lot of guest conducting, jobs and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said before, also last February I was in Russia, and actually got a chance to represent our country for a really great event for the America Seasons in Russia, and they had people like in the Chicago Symphony and different other groups, and I was just really quite happy, and I was really quite fortunate to be able to represent our country in a whole, if it was the Cold War, that, and also to bring them a taste of music that's not just standard classical music, but also music of composers of color to them, to their attention.
Right.
So that was really great.
How about you, Christine? What do you have up for the future? What's happening?
Well, I mentioned C-Force just recorded our second CD, so we're working on editing this summer, and we have some performances lined up. We're performing in a conference in Jamaica, in Kingston, at the Edna Manley College of the Arts.
Okay.
It's in October, and we're hoping to have a performance in Cuba in May as part of, we just came from Dominican Republic, where we performed and attended a conference, and we met some musicians from all over the world. But there's some Cuban musicians who mentioned a festival that they're having, and they invited us to that festival. So that's in the works also.
Do you get to perform at any of the hotels or any of the weddings or things like that? Do you do any of that?
We do more of our own concerts. So for example, we'll have a CD release probably in the fall sometime.
Okay.
So we'll perform a concert for that and have a reception. And we also want to have a performance. We're trying to arrange something for the Bahamian Independence with Chris Justilian's pieces.
For the 40th Independence celebration.
Yeah. So we want to have a performance where we're performing the suite, and then we have Mary and Bethel read her poems, and then show the photographs as well.
Good.
So
have you ever thought about putting music, dance, movement to your music?
That'd be great.
Yeah. Ballet.
Yeah. I mean, we would love to add that there.
It's just a beautiful music with movement. I can see the movement in the music that that's here.
Yeah. Joanne Callender heard that piece, and she said, "Chris needs to write words so she can sing it."
Okay.
Yeah. Everybody wants to be a part of it. It's really beautiful.
It is
music that he's written. So we're really excited about it.
Yeah, it's really so. You find that there's a growing appreciation for your music?
There is actually. People, a lot of the same of what Marlon has been talking about, that they don't realize that music is happening in Nassau and in the Bahamas, and they hear it, and especially when we perform pieces by Chris and Cleophas Adderley and Clement Bethel and Audrey Dean Wright, in Quincy Parker is another Bahamian composer that was at the Symposium. We recorded a piece of his, and people just don't think of that music as coming from the Bahamas. And one of the other things that I was thinking when Marlon was talking with a lot of these composers, the thing that I really love about their music is that they incorporate a lot of the folk elements of the music. And so, like what he was talking about, Bela Bartok, who cataloged all of the folk music. That's really common in especially Haitian composers. They've incorporated a lot of the voodoo and the religious music, the rhythms and the melodies into the classical works. And so that's what a lot of Bahamian composers are doing, and it's just a really unique sound. It's very beautiful.
Do you think you might be interested in trying to resurrect the folk music in Bahamas?
Oh, I mean, I would love to do that and have it in a more formalized way, so it can be preserved. And also for composers to have access to it, so they can incorporate it into their works. It's such a rich tradition.
It is.
Some younger artists who are starting to perform rake and scrape, and that's, to me, I believe that's a way to keep the tradition alive.
Right.
Because when young people see only old people playing this kind of music, they're not interested, because they just say, oh, that's for old people.
Right.
But there's, I don't know if you're familiar with Puzzle. Puzzle was originally he sang more, I'd say, R&B and some rap, and he did different styles of music, and he was popular mostly outside the Bahamas.
Right.
And he did one rake and scrape song, the Barefoot Bandit.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you heard that.
Yes.
It's a great song. It became a huge hit, and suddenly his career exploded in the Bahamas, and now he's written a couple more rake and scrape songs, and he's making rake and scrape more popular with young people.
Good.
And there's another artist, Cupid, who has a few hits. Bus Driver is one of them.
Okay.
It's a great song, and he's like in his early 20s, I think. And I invited them both to my college class at COB to sing for the students, and the students saw them and they go crazy, because somebody in their age singing this kind of music.
Right.
And they really do love the music, but in a way it's like they don't want to show that, because they know it's for old people. But when they see it's a young person, they have this completely different reaction. And they so I feel like these young musicians are sort of the hope to keep the music alive.
Okay. Yeah. You know, Bahamian American Cultural Society, which I'm the president, we're celebrating our 25th year this year.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And so we have always emphasized our culture as our mission, exposing our culture through food, music, visual arts, poetry, all the five, using the five senses, we say. Yeah.
So a lot of momentum on that. So there seems to be a lot more interest and pride.
Yeah. Everyone else is.
Be a part of that, because this whole event was centered around it. And, I think it's probably one of the first big events that happened around the 40th anniversary is ours. And so that was really being one of the hails of that, that really, being a part of it was really great. I think definitely the Bahamas has the seeds to make something like that grow. And, and they could be known for the entire Caribbean as the place that is sort of like the center.
Yes. Well, I want to thank both of you, Christine
and
Marlon,
Thank you so much for having us.
Really lively and interesting topic, and to highlight the symposium that a first for Bahamas.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
My name is Alice Yaker, and I'll be your host for a new monthly show on MNN called Nonprofit Challenges. My guests who work in the nonprofit world will discuss the challenges they confront and solutions they explore. Our first show, focused on fundraising, will be aired the fourth Sunday of the month during the civic programming block. I hope you'll join us.
Check MNN's new website at mnn.org. Get information about the show you just watched. Stream our channels anywhere in the world. Want to know when your show is playing? Look at our brand new updated schedule. Clearly see your show and the channel it comes on. If you want to become a member, we have a page that shows you how. MNN, the People's Channel, the People's Website.